Hello and welcome back to Modern World History, where we've been looking at World War II. And in the last video, we talked about the Pacific Campaign, and before that, we looked at Europe and North Africa. But one of the other things that we really need to take the time to do is discuss the Holocaust, which took place during World War II and just had huge consequences during and after the war. And so the Holocaust, what it is it's a movement that today we remember as this time where the Nazis tried to systematically exterminate the Jews from their population. And it wasn't just Jews, but it's anyone that didn't fit into that identity, that nationalistic identity as a Nazi, or that didn't fit in the mold because of race or ethnicity or culture or religion or whatever it might be. But I think the biggest point here is that the majority of the people that were killed or that had to live out the horrors of the Holocaust were Jews. And so there was very much a systematic policy of anti-Semitism against Jews in Nazi Germany. And so, first, to kind of backtrack a little bit, Jews have lived in Europe since about 70 AD after an event called the Diaspora, which was the first forced dispersal, of the Jews by the Roman Empire. Okay, so we'll write Roman Empire over here. And when we say dispersal, what we mean by that is that the Jews were always kind of rebelling against the Roman occupation because they felt like they were distinct, they were God's chosen people. They were looking for this Messiah that was supposed to liberate them from their oppressors. And so the Romans had finally gotten sick of it. In the year 70 AD, they came in and destroyed the temple and dispersed the Jewish people across their empire. And so the idea here was that they wanted to get rid of the Jewish culture. So for many, many years, for centuries, Europeans Jews had lived among Europeans in various different countries. And so if you remember back in some of the videos we looked at, or if you look at the Middle Ages leading into the Renaissance, the Inquisition, part of that was to get rid of Muslims, but part of that also kind of chased off Jews. In Spain, you've got Jews that would, go to in France and then eventually will run off of there due to some of the French policies. And so we've already kind of addressed the idea that Jews lived among the people of Europe for many, many years. And so Hitler used the fact that Europeans had had negative feelings towards Jews for this basically this whole time as an outlet by which he could pass the blame. All right. So part of the reason why Europeans had problems with Jews is simply because of culture and religion. All right. Culture and religion. So one of the things is during the Renaissance period, lenders, okay, so money lenders, people who were part of these banks that began to emerge, there was religious rules against the practice of usury, which is like basically putting like an interest tax on loans. Jews had no problems with things like this, and so often Jews tended to be a little bit wealthy businessmen type people, and a lot of times that really made some of the Christian majority populations in Europe really kind of have a little bit of disdain towards them because they thought that maybe they were a little shady in the way they would acquire their wealth. So just little things like that right there have been playing out for centuries. And so the Nuremberg laws in Germany during the time where the Nazis were coming to power, leading up to World War II, the Nuremberg laws deprived Jews of German citizenship. Okay, because remember, the Nazis and fascists in general, but Nazis were all about nationalism. Nationalism. So if you weren't part of that ethnic national identity in Germany, in other words, if you were Jewish, then you would not have citizenship. You couldn't be a part of that country. And so there were going to be no intermarriages. Germans could not marry someone who was Jewish. They're also going to limit the jobs and the opportunities for Jews. And so Herschel Greenspan was a Jewish boy who was in France. And while he was in France, he kills a German diplomat in Paris. And so you've got this Jewish kid who kills this German diplomat. It really ticked off people back at in Germany, and they use this as a justification. The German soldiers and all that use this as a justification to go and destroy basically all these Jewish businesses and homes on an event that we now know as Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass, is what that translates into. And so, if you look here at this little quote here, this primary source comes from the textbook. All things for which my parents had worked for 18 long years were destroyed in less than 10 minutes. Piles of valuable glasses, expensive furniture, linens, in short, everything was destroyed. The Nazis left us, yelling, "Don't try to leave this house. We'll soon be back and take you to a concentration camp to be shot." All right. So Kristallnacht was kind of like the first big incident against Jewish people on account of the fact that they're just Jews. And so by now, many Jews had begun to kind of pick up on the fact that it ain't going to get better before it gets worse, and they start trying to flee to neighboring countries. And so when this happens, you've got what we call today a refugee crisis. So a refugee is someone who leaves a country because they're in danger. We say because they're in danger if they stay. Okay, so right now, some places we're hearing about refugees would be Syria is one big place. South Sudan is one place, or Sudan in general. But South Sudan is terrible civil war. Even some, we're looking at the immigration issues in the United States right now. You've got people coming from countries in Central America where they're trying to cross into the United States on account of the fact that they're in danger because of who they are or how they live or whatever it might be. So the issue here is this: the foreign minister in Germany, very very nationalistic. We all want to get rid of our Jews. I'm reading right here from the quote. This is what he said. The difficulty is that no country wishes to receive them. So what happens is with any refugee situation, too many refugees is kind of like a domestic problem for whatever country it brings them in. And I know it sounds really harsh, but if you look at Syria, for example, and then you look at neighboring Jordan, which brought in millions of these refugees, they couldn't take care of them all, and it was putting a strain on their own country and culture. In Europe, part of the immigration problem there is that they wanted to be able to protect their culture from the foreign influence of people of different ethnicities and different religions. And that's also, ladies and gentlemen, the exact same thing that's driving the immigration debacle that's going on right now in the United States. And so really, you can look at as too much of a refugee situation as a burden in the, especially if you look at the fact that, well, what if they can't take care of themselves? Or what if they come in and they have different ideology? Or what if they come in and they, God forbid, commit some kind of a crime or something against people in the country? And so the same thing is happening here with the Jewish people who were refugees in countries like the United States and like other European countries in the West. They refused to take them in. They sent them back. Okay? And so there's the key here. They sent them back. And so the foreign minister could not get rid of the Jews that they had there. They were trying to get rid of. And I'm not saying that's what the answer should have been. I mean, they should have just been okay with the idea that people are different and embraced their differences, but that's not what was happening. So what the Germans did in response to the fact that they couldn't send away or run off the Jews is they start these ghettos, which are rundown neighborhoods that were kind of blocked off to kind of include nothing but Jews. It was a system of segregation in which only Jews were going to be there. These Jewish zones, they were isolated and overcrowded. You can see what that looks like right here in this snip of this Jewish ghetto. And the hopes were that they were going to die off of disease or starvation for being too close to quarters. But the Jews were extremely resilient and resistant to these policies, and they hung on. They continued to practice their culture and their religion, even though they were told not to do so. They continued to find ways to band together as a community of one and defy the odds. And so the final solution would be the systematic killing of Jews. And this here is the terminology that is used to describe the final part of the plan to rid Germany of Jews. So I didn't make that up. That's actually what what they called it, their final solution. And so this right here really is what we're going to define as genocide, or the systematic killing of a group of people. Sorry, and you need to know this, okay? And it's on the basis of one's culture or ethnicity, or in some way their differences. And we've seen this even since the Holocaust. We've seen examples of genocide. Even before the Holocaust, we've seen examples of genocide. And so it's but the way that they did it here, I guess, and really it's always going to be systematic. So I mean, you can't really measure the killing of any one group of people over another. But what they did here was they almost industrialized. I think is the word I'm looking for. They industrialized the killing of human beings, which is sick and twisted on so many levels. So at first, what would happen, just kind of coming up here, is killing squads went to towns, rounded up Jews, and killed them, and by firing squads. They would actually lure them off in these mass graves, shoot them, they fall in the graves, and they bury them. This would here cause a lot of problems with German troops who, you can imagine the psychological problems you would have with rounding up families of people and killing them on the basis of who they are. It doesn't matter what your beliefs are. That's gonna tear some people to the core. And so this was such a terrible thing to be doing this kind of killing in person anyway, and commanding troops to do so, that what they had begun to do was create these work camps where people would go in and work themselves to death. And this here is where you see all the pictures, like the ones below here, and all the pictures of some of the survivors that were just as bony as a skeleton, no nourishment whatsoever. They weren't able to eat. They starved. They would eat crumbs or drink water or things like that, and not have food. They were beat for whatever kind of thing that was seen as a act of defiance, or whatever it might be, or just not doing a good enough job, according to the Nazis that were there. And there were also lots of killings. So Zyklon B is a kind of poison that was used to kill the Jews systematically in an industrial kind of a way. And what they would do is they would lead the people into shower rooms where Jews thought that they were about to take a shower, and then instead of being sprayed with water, they were sprayed by the cyanide gas, the deadly Zyklon B mixture that would kill them within minutes. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen the Boy in the Striped Pajamas. Now, I will tell you with fair warning, if you ever watch that movie, it's gut-wrenching. Okay, so be ready, but you can see what this looks like by watching that movie, and kind of get kind of an idea of the indoctrination of the Nazi youth, okay, as well as looking at the terror that is the Holocaust. So that movie would do a good job at kind of opening your eyes to what it could have been like. But when it's all said and done, this is a terrible, nasty part of human history right here. You can look at the statistics down here at the based on the chart here from your textbook. And you've got the original populations listed out on the left, okay? And then you've got the Jews who were killed, and then the percent who survived. All right, and now this number would, I mean, this chart is old, okay? So I don't know that the numbers are that different. My understanding is it's somewhere around about 12 million, right? Somewhere around about 12 million Jews in the world today. That's not a lot of people, okay? You think about, the state you live in probably has more than that, depending on where you are. There are some mega cities that have 12 million people living in them. And so that's not a whole lot of people when you look at a global population. But you've got Poland, by more than half of the Jewish population was gone. More than half of those who were in areas occupied by Germans in the Soviet Union were gone, and so on. You can just look down the list, and it's terrible the numbers of Jews that lost their lives to the Holocaust due to this ethnocentric, nationalistic ideology that is fascism. So Eli Wiesel, who wrote the book Night, based on his own experience as a Holocaust survivor, never shall I forget the little faces of children whose bodies I saw turned into wreaths of smoke beneath a silent blue sky. Never shall I forget those flames which consumed my faith forever. Never shall I forget those moments which murdered my God and my soul and turned my dreams to dust. Never. As one last recommendation, on YouTube you can see an episode where Oprah Winfrey travels with Eli Wiesel back to Auschwitz, and you can actually see them go through and talk about it. Very, very sobering video to watch. I highly would recommend you guys do that for more understanding on the Holocaust. And so, the best way, in my mind, to make sure that as human beings we don't repeat these things is to learn about what happened that led up to them and what happened during those events, and then figure out what do we need to do to make sure this never happens again. Thanks for watching.